Well, hello everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for our joint webinar with StockIQ and DynamicWeb.
Thank you so much, Alana. I'm really excited about today's conversation. As Alana said, I'm Jacob Whitlow, Director of Accounts at DynamicWeb. I've been with our company for the last 2 years, but have spent over 15 years working in the e-commerce space in different capacities. And so I know you'll hear both Jeffrey and I speak today about our experience, both with current state, but also what we've seen in the past, and even more importantly, where we see this online world headed. I love connecting with customers, both prospective and existing, and helping them connect their vision to results and reality. So you hear us talk a lot today about customers we've supported, where we've helped them. We've all lived through an unprecedented time, obviously, the last few years with the pandemic, and so I know that'll inform our conversation today. But even more importantly, where's this world headed that we're all living in from an online selling perspective? By trade and background, I'm also a writer and a storyteller, which means I get to really use those gifts and passions every day as I'm, again, supporting our customers. And on my side, I love to run, kayak. We live in a beautiful area of the world that has water all around us. And I'm also a grandfather, which I know I share that passion and love with Jeffrey as well. So just a little bit about myself, and excited about today's conversation. So this is where DynamicWeb sits in the online world. We are an all-in-one platform. We have what we call a digital experience platform, and the key components of that are content management, a system, a true drag and drop, no code, low code. What you see is what you get front end, with a powerful marketing, e-commerce, and product information management capabilities that sit and underpin those front-end experiences. And so as Jeffrey and I are talking today, we're going to discuss a lot about source of truth. Where does information come from? You see it on the left side, and more importantly, where do you want it to go on the right end? So I'm sure we have folks joining who may just be starting your e-commerce online journey, others who may be well down that road. So I'm sure you'll be aware of some of those inputs and of course the outputs as well. StockIQ is one of those key inputs, and so again we'll be discussing some of what Jeffrey has seen in his space, why inventory information matters, and just as importantly, why information availability matters as well. Having the right information in front of the right customer at the right time is critical. So looking forward to today's conversation and diving a little bit deeper about what DynamicWeb does and how we support and partner with StockIQ. Over to you, Jeffrey.
All righty. Thank you, Jacob. Appreciate that intro into how we're connecting. My name is Jeffrey Porter. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at StockIQ Technologies. I've been in the inventory planning space for a little over 30 years at this point. I enjoy consulting, working with our clients on their inventory planning. And inventory planning is pretty deep. I would think at this point in my career that I'd have all the answers. I just discover what new changes are coming on board, and it's been a great opportunity to really continue to expand my knowledge and planning around that inventory. I do have deep experience in supply chain. Supply chain started for me back when a lot of the manufacturing was done here in North America, and it began outsourcing. With that outsourcing came long lead times. We're faced with that these days, which puts a lot of emphasis on planning. So we need to understand what's going to be happening in the future. I think there's also at that same time, we've seen a huge increase in expectations around product availability. When it appears up on a web, through your e-commerce platforms, the expectation is we have an opportunity to capture business if the product's available to fulfill. So I love that connection in here as the world has moved into the online world, and we'll talk about how we can integrate that. I am passionate about serving others and helping them through these processes. From an interest standpoint, I had to limit this to 3 items in here. I enjoy hiking, fly fishing, and I am a grandfather as well. So I take a lot of pleasure in the grandchildren. Alrighty, so a little bit about StockIQ that'll help prep this conversation. So StockIQ is an intelligent supply chain planning application. The things that are involved in supply chain planning include a demand plan or demand forecasting, which is anticipating what we're going to be selling. We're going to talk a little bit about replenishing to that anticipated sell, monitoring our vendors' performance so that we can be able to account for any variation that they're delivering early or delivering late. Goal here and objective is making sure we have the right inventory to support our e-commerce channels and other channels we're selling through. Promotion planning, a very key element in that oftentimes when we see promotions come through, it can drastically change the demand for product. And again, if we don't have the availability in line with that expectation, opportunities for missed sales, missed revenue, and potentially lost customers at the end of the day. Inventory planning, and then lastly, the sales and operations planning, which ties all of the planning together and our execution and the sales, all of these strategies to make sure that we're in alignment. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand this back over to Jacob, and he's going to share a little bit about defining your e-commerce vision.
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey. And as key component there at the top, it says getting started. And as I mentioned earlier, not sure where everybody who's joined this webinar today or be watching the future will land, but we have a mix of customers who we support. I'd say 50% of those actually, who 50% have never done anything online at all from a selling perspective. They may have an informational type website, but they're just starting that journey. And then, the other 50%, may have been selling for years online, but have hit ceilings, limitations with their current vendor and are looking for a new platform. In both cases, though, whenever I'm meeting them for the first time, I ask, what is your vision for the future? Short-term goals, quick solves and things that need to be put in place that are broken, kind of Band-Aid solutions. But even more importantly, what's your long-term vision? The companies that really succeed, and this has been true, before we lived in an online world, even more so, that succeed long-term, really look at that long-term vision and say, this is where we want to be in 3, 5, 10 years. The world is changing faster than it ever has. And that's definitely been, accelerated because of the shift online that we've seen. So that's a key part, and again, something we love doing from a consultative approach. I know you mentioned that, Jeffrey, I know that's also in your DNA too, not just selling something, but really guiding a customer. And we love being part of that conversation. So as that second bullet point says, really make sure that you're researching leading competitors. We always say we're biased, and I work for DynamicWeb for a reason, because it's an amazing platform with incredible people. And we love being part of that conversation with a customer who's researching the right online platform for them. But there are times where we'll just say, no, we're not the right fit for them for whatever reason, and actually recommend another trusted partner or platform in the space. So that's a key part of our just initial engagement, is really helping our customers in a guided way, with understanding our platform and for the right fit for them. One of the key things we heard recently, Jeffrey, I don't know how true this is in your world, but by the time somebody comes to us and they're looking for a platform, we know that about 70% of the research is already done. So they've actually been, online, looking into our capabilities, checking out events like this, really making sure they understand, where we fit in the marketplace. And so then it's really just a closing process from us on the back end of that initial vetting conversation. Branding and content obviously matters. So what's your story? Why do you matter in the marketplace? How do you differentiate yourself? And I know omnichannel, can tend to be kind of a buzzword, but it's a true reality that there's really no differentiation between online and offline in today's world. And we'll talk through some case studies actually a little bit later as far as that pertains. But also marketplaces are a real factor. So obviously Amazon, eBay, and others. These are all capabilities of the DynamicWeb platform from a support perspective. Lastly, and while it says versus here, there really is no differentiation as we see it from a business to business or a B2C, or D2C from a front end visual perspective. DynamicWeb, about 80% of our customers do sell just B2B. We have a blend as well, where they're selling hybrid and some that sell directly to consumer only. But we really are hearing consistently from our customers that they expect a powerful front end experience. Amazon and others have just changed the world in that perspective, where we want to see a really dynamic front end and a powerful back end perspective. So yeah, I'm curious, Jeffrey, again, from your perspective, how do these items align to what you see when a customer is engaging with StockIQ for the first time?
It's very interesting, Jacob, and in fact, very similar from the standpoint. In fact, I'd actually say it's maybe even a little higher than 70% of the people that have engaged have already gone out and they've done their research with respect to, hey, what looks like a good platform for us? So by the time we really engage somebody, they've done their research. They've typically narrowed down the number of solutions that are out there. So very similar experience. I'll also share with you, as you were kind of talking about this omni-channel and the B2B versus B2C, we saw a huge explosion during the pandemic, specifically just the dynamics of how we were all not able to go out and shop in brick and mortar stores. We had a large percentage of our clients that began embarking on this journey, in an omni-channel type of a world versus potentially just distribution and or going through a brick and mortar. And I can tell you in a lot of cases, the individuals weren't prepared for that. They just recognized that sales were being hugely impacted from the standpoint people weren't visiting their stores anymore or visiting the distribution. So a big change and shift in how people went to market. That has stayed. We've seen a little bit of a pullback and maybe not quite the acceleration that we saw during the pandemic, a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction, recognizing that we were in a position. But like you, very similar experiences with the research and the omni-channel. It's become a big aspect for how people plan when they're moving forward.
Absolutely. And I know maybe jump to the next slide, that's a great pivot to some of those key factors that I know that you take into consideration when customers are first reaching out to you and wanting to engage in a dialogue.
So leveraging e-commerce and supply chain planning, as we talk about this, there's an expectation in the marketplace, right? When we put our shingle up and we're advertising product for sale or wares, whatever we're selling, that the expectation is there's the inventory to fill that requirement or fill that overall order. So understanding in a real-time fashion what's available, so we can communicate that back to the customer, be it a business, be it an individual, is going to be a key one for us. Improving that order fulfillment, this is oftentimes an opportunity for us to differentiate. So as we're talking about our overall e-commerce journey, this is people's experience, right? And oftentimes you're not necessarily engaged directly in that. I mean, we can monitor various statistics, and Jake can speak directly to that, how long people are spending on sites and what they're looking at with their marketplace. But from our perspective, when it comes down to the supply chain planning, we're the recipients of a lot of this information and how the consumer, how the individual is going out or the businesses are going out and doing their research, which products are looking at, which ones are moving. And again, these trends and these dynamics tend to change how we react. As I mentioned, the supply chain lead time is quite extensive these days. Even when we're not having port issues or whatever else it might encounter, planning well in advance of this is really a key requirement in order to be able to maintain that order fulfillment. The one thing that I can share with you when we look at e-commerce, we tend to see pretty drastic shifts in the overall demand patterns, being a promotion, especially as we're talking about like through the Amazons and the other worlds. If something gets featured on a front page, demand can explode hundreds of percents, right? So it's a big time shift, and being able to anticipate that and do it in an automated fashion, not waiting for somebody to discover these things real time, is really what we're focused on, which is saying, hey, we need to plan for this well in advance.
Yeah, I love what you said about the availability of a product being key, and it really starts before, typically for our customers, before one of their customers even lands on their portal. So it's Google, right? That dominates still from a search engine perspective. But also, we know that something like 50% of buying decisions start actually using Amazon search. So how do you, deflect that to your own portal is a key question we get all the time from customers, because that competition is a real factor for a lot of the customers we support, where they've got to really have a robust, SEO capabilities stood up. That storytelling matters so much to make sure that their products are boosted in the right way, using, Google and other engines as well. So that's a key component, something we're seeing. AI is obviously a real factor here as far as product enrichment, enhancement, and something that's in the DynamicWeb platform, just by way of making sure that you're really creating some robust storytelling capabilities on the product level to drive those customers to the portal. Then you have the right experience, where especially from inventory, because if you broadcast all your amazing products but don't actually have the ability to tell if somebody can buy them. Transitioning again to the next slide is, what is the source of truth? Where is that information stored? And so if we could jump over, and talk through. For us from DynamicWeb perspective, it's going to be the ERP, but this is where StockIQ, with your capabilities, Jeff, really come into play, feeding information into that ERP, where then a platform like DynamicWeb can actually digest it and push it out. Maybe you want to talk through some of the key components that you look at, in that StockIQ column.
Yeah, happy to take you through there. So stocking levels obviously are being fed directly in from the ERP, but it's what products available. will impact how we're positioning product on our various pages and availability, feeding information directly into the e-commerce platform with respect to what we want to promote. I would tell you revenue logistics. Revenue, we're tracking kind of anticipated spend and what's available. Forecasting. Forecasting is what I would consider to be kind of the core and the heart of all of this, which is as we begin our planning journey, understanding what we think we're going to be selling in light of these various channels that we're dealing with, and understanding promotions that might impact that demand. This can also, from a forecasting perspective, when we start moving into sales and operations planning, begin aligning what our plans that are in place relative to what the goals and objectives are for an annual budget, for instance. So as we are looking at this, understanding that forecast is a key element. As we continue to move down there, if we look at product ranking is a key element for understanding what product is moving, what product is not moving, which ones we need to potentially remove, different pages and positioning. So StockIQ will analyze that. This also has a key effect on how we want to position product availability. Obviously, as we begin getting into the volatility of demand and that variation that we're seeing with potential increases in demand, understanding how well we're going to support that from an inventory perspective would engage all parties, within the entity. Fulfillment speed, improved service levels. We are monitoring how we're doing our filling. This is a type of information that StockIQ is analyzing and then utilizing in conjunction with our omni-channel fulfillment.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I'm just thinking through this, Jeffrey, we've referenced a couple times just what we've seen. I'd love to hear from any of the attendees today. Where are the real world, components where this is applicable to your business, especially from an inventory perspective, of course, but where are you looking to sell online today, or where are you already selling but want to, enhance that experience? And even more, and specifically, how does, again, that inventory component really tie into your world? I know Jeffrey and I would both love to, field any questions that you want to drop into the Q&A as we're going through this. But thanks for walking us through that, Jeffrey. That's so helpful. And from a, DynamicWeb perspective, again, marketplaces are at the top, but obviously the website, the primary portal itself, tends to be the number one need for our customers. And then how do they augment that through those additional components there? So we've got some powerful ways to generate product spec information, for instance, using our PIM, I mentioned that, and push that out using a tool we call publication. So it's really taking it offline, like a catalog, for instance, which can still be a really powerful differentiator from a product detail perspective, and make that available online. That's something we hear all the time is, from our customers is offline still matters. Brick and mortar is not going away. And to your point, I think that's something that we've seen definitely again since the pandemic. Restaurants have bounced back. Movie theaters, bless them, are still trying to catch up. But there has definitely been that shift where people still want in-person, real experiences. And so how do you supplement and augment, that brand identity across all channels? And that's really the key message here on this slide. But thank you for that overview, Jeffrey. That's really helpful.
Yeah, you bet, Jacob.
All right, we can move forward. And these are a couple of the key things, and by no means is this an exhaustive list, but these are some of the foundational pillars that I know we see in both of our worlds that really matter from an ERP and e-com integration perspective. Just a little bit of a tech kind of moment here, but DynamicWeb has an open integration framework. So we are agnostic from an ERP perspective. I've integrated over 50 plus ERPs in our time since we started back in 1999. And we know that, again, critically when a customer comes to us, these tend to be the items that matter the most. It's getting, the sales order streamlined and pulled through in an automated way. And that's true both for online orders, but also for offline orders as well. We call, like a phone call or an email, even a brick and mortar order. That information will be pulled from the ERP and then pushed through into DynamicWeb. When it doesn't happen on DynamicWeb, and when it happens on DynamicWeb, it'll actually go in a seamless way back to the ERP. So to your point, Jeffrey, about forecasting demand, that availability to really understand what customers are doing on a portal is a powerful tool. You mentioned, that understanding the data when they land on the site. We have the ability to track customers, of course, with their permission because of the rules and regulations in place, but understanding what they're doing on the site, and even more importantly, what they're not doing. So abandoned cart, for instance. If you start to see a customer who's putting an item in their cart but not checking out, following up with an email to them. But also if you see a surge in demand where customers are buying a product, to your point, that can then help with, adjusting or revising the inventory component, which is that second critical foundational bullet, and really, helping guide that decision making, both short term and long term. I'm curious, where do you see those two things specifically from a StockIQ perspective, Jeffrey? Those two foundational pillars.
Yeah, the two foundational. So bottom line, as we were talking about the forecasting, the sales orders and understanding the history of what's been accomplished in the past or what's been sold in the past can help inform us in the future. So as we begin laying out our channel strategies and potentially moving into an omni-channel strategy, that foundation oftentimes is our sales order history. That's a key element for generating a forecast. What we find in so many cases is somebody can develop a forecast, but it tends to be a little bit biased. So we tend to see that finance is biased on the downside, sales is biased on the upside, so that they can drive materials in, so to mean that, hey, the product's available when it's for selling. Our source of truth, as we were talking about it, would be the sales history, and then any other components as it relates to promotions or other aspects that might impact that demand. At the end of the day, though, we're looking at being able to ascertain whether the plans that we have in place are realistic, in line with our goals and objectives. The inventory obviously is going to support our ability to meet those goals and objectives, but we do need the lead time. So the big deal about being able to generate a forecast and understand what the plans are is to be able to position the inventory properly based on our service objectives, based on that classing, and look at the items that we feel are key for promoting our company, right? And making sure that those products are always in stock. People have a lot of options, and as I was listening to you talk previously about the experience that people have, I just recently purchased a solar panel for my small electric boat, and the number of options that popped up to me, I will say, were a bit overwhelming. So how did I decide what I was going to do? I went out and I looked at the product. I went to the folks, their websites. I went to their e-commerce platforms to do a bit of research, because there were so many options and they're all promoting that they can do all of these things. I needed more information, and that experience helped me make a decision on which product I was going to be purchasing. Because it can be a little bit overwhelming, especially in the marketplaces like your Amazons. There were so many pages filled up of possible options. I just didn't know which one to pick, right? So.
Yeah, that's good. Trust is everything. I love that you just highlight that, and it's critical. Trust, that the orders could be fulfilled, obviously, but also the inventory information is accurate, correct, but even more importantly, reviews. That's
Yes.
a huge element, and there's so much noise out there. To your point, how do you really cut through that? And again, we love being part of that journey with our customers, because it is a massive factor how you differentiate yourself from the competition. A couple other key things highlighting on that advanced side, and we'll actually talk about this. I'll go a little bit deeper here in a second on the quotes front. But this is critical, Jeffrey, as far as the stock element, because we have a lot of customers where DynamicWeb is a portal that supports complex needs. So there are great tools out there that are simple, t-shirt, buy a t-shirt, check out, and you're good to go. But our customers have multiple pricing tiers, differentiation, territory restrictions, some of those really complex needs from the ERP perspective that then need to be represented on the front end. And quotes and warranty claims are two of those that we commonly see. We have customers where maybe 98% of their SKUs are quote driven. So they may just have a handful of stock SKUs. So from an inventory management perspective, you can imagine the complexities that introduces. And then warranty claims, obviously can be a critical element, especially in shifting automation away from that can be a very manual process, true of quotes too. And again, I want to touch on this here in a second when we go into one of our case studies. But those are both really time-consuming manual processes that can be automated and streamlined in a really powerful way, using a self-service portal. So, every time I'm talking to a prospective customer, these are some of the key things that I'm addressing. And it sounds like that you're taking into consideration too on your side, Jeffrey.
Yeah, in fact, a really good point on the warranty claims. Oftentimes, this is some of the more challenging inventory planning to account for, because oftentimes warranty claims don't come in every day. Sometimes they come in droves, but understanding that we typically consider this a bit more of replacement parts or sporadic demand, but it's a key element for the experience people have had. I think we all understand the products that we purchase in the marketplace, they aren't all going to last forever, but being able to fix them, get the warranty claims, helps with that experience, right, with the company that's delivering it. Oftentimes, it's not just the sale on the front end, it's supporting on the back end. And how easy is it to accommodate it, especially if we've invested heavily in product, right? And we have issues with it, we want to be able to get it resolved, and warranting that back end experience is a key one. And if inventory is a component of that fix for that warranty, we want to make sure that that's available and it's not a 6-month or a 4-month type of a wait, right? So positioning that product to support this is a really key element.
That's so good. That's a great transition to the next slide. We'll briefly dive into a couple of case studies where we've actually helped customers. Hager is one of the oldest existing companies in America. It was founded in the 1700s as a blacksmith shop. And so you talk about forward thinking. They've been around for a long time and have maintained their relevancy and their primacy in the space because they're always forward thinking, looking at how they can revise and revamp their approach both from an online and an offline perspective. And so we've built a really powerful portal for them. They have a massive SKU assortment, and a large number of those are custom products. If you walk into any building, if you start looking at the hinges and the door handles in that space, you'll most likely see that they're Hager products. And what they do is they have the ability for their customers to use their vast assortment of stock SKUs, but also customize those by color, dimension, just a lot of flexibility. And what they've done on our portal is built a really robust quoting mechanism for their sales team to track those quotes, those customer requests, and then they actually use that data to decide if a product should become a stock SKU. So based on the number of times that a customer is requesting that then gives them some leverage and flexibility from a forecasting perspective to look ahead and determine, if they need to pivot that SKU and make it something that's available to their large customer base. So again, a really powerful use case of our platform, some of the breadth and depth of what we've been able to build. And of course, I'd be happy to talk through more Hager related content with anybody at any time. And this is Winnebago. So I referenced at the beginning, Hager's a classic B2B customer, although you can see some content without logging in, but you have to actually log in to see, full pricing and product mix on their side. Winnebago is an RV manufacturer. And about 8 years ago, they came to us. They tried a couple of different online portals. It just hadn't landed. And they wanted to really create an extension of their offline brand. They saw the way the world was shifting really before anybody else in their space did. It's created an incredible online ecosystem to drive the initial consumer purchasing. We talked about 70% of decision making. They really saw that and have built an online portal to support that. And I don't know, if you know this, if you paid attention during the pandemic, but the RV sales industry just went through the roof during those couple of years. Everybody wanted to travel, get out and go on an adventure. And because Winnebago had prepared for the unexpected, they were able to do some incredible site launch or product launches using the DynamicWeb platform during the pandemic and had incredible engagement. Saw a 400 plus increase in leads during that, generated a tremendous number of new connections and trust building cues with their customers. So I love talking about Winnebago as a customer who had that foresight to plan for the unexpected. Now they also struggled to keep up the demand like everybody else because that just unprecedented availability. So that was definitely a real component for them. But it's a powerful example again of a customer who's really benefited from our platform. I'm just curious, Jeffrey, talking about Hager and Winnebago, as you look at, again, your world, how you support customers, how do these two stories resonate for you?
Yeah, in fact, as I was thinking through here, very, very much resonate with me from the standpoint that for like Hager at this point, there's so many different options that are available. And our experience has been identifying what we're going to stock and what we're not going to stock, what people are willing to wait for and not wait for. And I'll be doing a little bit of follow-up on that on the back end, but we have this huge product assortment. Oftentimes we're battling limited resources on the back end. So there's always this, we can be everything to everyone, or we make conscious decisions around we're going to be positioning our stock. So understanding the behavior of the customer which products are moving, which products are not moving. And as we move in, I think about it in forms of a style as well, right? We get into these seasons and out of these seasons. And when we move from certain colors and certain finishes, that's an important factor from the standpoint that it informs our supply chain on where we're going to be positioning inventory. It's very relevant from the standpoint that a change in customer dynamics, it can take 6 months or 8 months to position product to be able to support those changes. So as much advance notice that we get, and it's by observing customer behaviors, right? In these small incremental changes that occur in the overall buying behaviors might be an early indication of changes that are coming forward. With respect to Winnebago, yeah, please go ahead, Jacob.
No, I was just saying, you just perfectly encapsulated the 3 primary goals of this webinar. So I just want to give you a little bit of kudos. I don't know if you planned that, but efficient inventory management, forecasting precision, and really that customer experience is what we're talking about. At the bottom line, end of the day, that's really the key thing. So keep going on Winnebago, but I love that you just
well, thank you for highlighting that. Yeah. So appreciate that. Yeah, with respect to Winnebago, kudos to them for having the foresight to understand the changes and the shifts. It's been really interesting as you begin looking at Winnebago. Tended to be an older product, had been around for a long time. I can tell you when I look around at the product, the one that stands out the most at this point is Winnebago. So they've done something right in the marketplace to understand where the customer dynamic, it's totally changed, and I'm speaking from a personal perspective on the appearance of the brand. I can't say that I necessarily considered that maybe a go-to product, right? Or maybe one of the premium products, but as I'm looking at their selections and the things that are driving around, it's really stuck out. So I'll just share that from a personal experience. But the planning side, as you mentioned in there, difficult to position product. Everybody was having challenges, and there were a lot of unanticipated challenges from the standpoint that who could have foresaw that we ran into so many shipping related issues, right? With the ports and the backups, things that were difficult. They ended up being these events that were, I won't say once in a lifetime, but they're not going to happen very frequently. Having said that, my guess is Winnebago had a good positioning going into this with their suppliers. And what our experience has been in this, that the suppliers are doing the better planning, that are feeding that into their suppliers. They were the ones that typically were responded to on the front end versus somebody that maybe hadn't been keeping up on their planning aspect, all of a sudden came in with large orders trying to capture that demand. These folks had a pipeline of supply coming in, obviously constrained by logistics and a few other things. But often our experience has been that our clients in similar situations that had a good plan in place were oftentimes the one that received the inventory on the front end.
Yeah, 100% can second that. Yeah.
All righty. Okay, we're going to take a little bit. I've been talking a little bit about referencing like product selection, going through and understanding where our products are moving. So I'm going to actually share a little bit about the product on the back end, which is what do we do with this information and this insight that we have into the market as we're moving in here. So what I'm going to do is we'll actually just dive directly into the overall application. We'll share a little bit about what we're looking at in here. All right. So one of the things, and I'd like to start off with, when we begin looking at product, I've talked to you about monitoring the movement of product and how it's behaving in the marketplace. So for instance, when we introduce a new SKU, oftentimes there's this whole concept around saying we're going to protect service level, we're going to position inventory in the marketplace to be able to support our desired goals and objectives. When we introduce product into here, basically what we're going to be doing is evaluating how many times it gets ordered, the quantities that are sold, and then periodically we're going to go through and we're going to evaluate that in the context of all of the other SKUs that we're evaluating. So this little matrix that we're talking about in here is really that analysis in a visual form, and we'll talk about the data that sits behind it. It's basically allowing us to come out and say, hey, based on our observations and based on the feedback that we're getting from a sales perspective, how is it performing? And you will notice the colors. There's no coincidence in here, or it's not a coincidence that in the upper left-hand corner out in here, we have colors that are go forward, right? Meaning A items, B items, these are things that are selling. These first column of information, product that's selling on a consistent basis, as opposed to product that might reside down here on the lower right. What we're referring to with product down in here, maybe it's not meeting the quantities that we expected to sell, the revenue that we're generating, and maybe it's just slow-based sales. So when we find products that are over in here, they become candidates for reducing service levels, maybe changing how we're positioning inventory. I'd obviously, when I'm planning, want to make certain that these products that we receive a lot of hits on, a lot of orders on, we want to position high service level objectives. So the information that supports our web strategy or our different channel strategy is basically saying, okay, this is where the customers are gravitating towards. We need to make sure that there's plenty of inventory. Some of the information that we're evaluating in that context comes into the fact that we're looking at how many customers are purchasing this if we're in a B2B world. It might come into what's our overall total demand quantity. So we can sort and filter and say, this is a big runner for us, right? And we can look at the overall trends and how they're moving. So the information that's presented through this overall analysis is going to give us insight as to who's purchasing, what the quantities that they're purchasing, and the overall trending. I think right on the front end, Jacob mentioned the fact that really what we're here to do is help folks identify trends. We have snapshots of data, but we can also identify where things are going in the marketplace. So for instance, if I were to take a look at this product that I've highlighted in here, we'd had some successive peaks in sales, but we've also seen a decline over time. That might change our behavior on how we're positioning it, on our front end, our web store. It might change how we're deciding to position inventory as well. So this overall analysis, we typically would go through and analyze this product, and then at the end of the day would assign service objectives with this product. Higher service objective, higher amounts of inventory to absorb the variability that we're seeing up in here, the greater sales. And then down here on the overall lower right, basically what we're doing is just saying, maybe we need to think about removing that product. Maybe that's not where we need to go with those individuals. So analyzing this information can be quite insightful for the sales team, for the marketing team, the product marketing management. So we have that aspect of it. There's another component that I want to talk to as well in forecasting. One of the things that we talk about in forecasting gets into identifying where we're selling. So one of the things, a big shift that we have seen recently is the movement into what we call this omni-channel strategy, which is I'm selling through a marketplace. Maybe I have a brick and mortar. Maybe I have standard distribution. Each of those behave differently. And oftentimes, maybe the overall total demand that we're seeing across all of those channels is staying pretty stable or growing at a certain percent. But understanding what's going on underneath and how those channels are taking over is a really key element. So one of the things that we do in the solution on the back end, and what we found is very critical for our clients, is being able to understand those various channels or those marketplaces and being able to forecast them independently. So as we come out here, we might have different sources. Maybe we're selling through big box. Maybe we're selling overstock.com. Maybe we have our own e-commerce platform. Being able to, one, monitor the demand that's in each one of those channels, being able to encapsulate and incorporate potential promotions that are going on in one channel versus another will help us position that inventory, but also helps us understand what the product's doing, how the customers are behaving on the back end. So what you're looking at in here is we start by looking at sales history. We talked about that on the front end, which is how is the customer behaving? And is there a seasonal profile associated with it? Do we see big spikes in demand? Did we position this product? Did we feature it on the front page of our e-commerce platform? What was going on that really impacted those overall sales? So this type of insight, by looking at that sales history, will help inform our inventory policy. So the things that we can do with this is we can look at the overall trends, obviously very important, as we begin identifying where we're going to position that inventory. Do we maintain that product? Is there any seasonal profile associated with this product, meaning certain times of the year that we need to position that product, ramp up for those sales? We were talking a little bit earlier about potential Black Fridays, and if we miss Black Friday and we don't have inventory positioned, that's a big no-no for us, right? So understanding how those behaviors go. I was on the phone yesterday with a client, and they were talking about Christmas in July. It was really interesting, right? Selling Christmas products in the July, but there was a distinct profile in that overall demand. So understanding that's a real key element for us being able to predict what that demand looks like moving out into the future. The other component that we're talking about as well is, as we begin planning, are we moving into any promotions or other aspects? So for instance, let me pull up another product in here and we'll take a look at this. Do we have activities that are planned for out in the future? Maybe it's a Black Friday event. Well, we need to know about that well in advance. History can help inform that, but we also need to know what the plans are future moving forward so that we can position that product to account for that. Likewise, when we begin moving out of those promotional type of periods, being able to explain away those peaks in inventory sales. We don't want to plan for those if we're not doing promotions in the future. So that type of insight is really going to be key elements for us to position product in the future to meet the demands, both seasonal demand, promotional demand, and then identifying what our goals and objectives are from a fulfillment perspective. You will note in here that we've assigned a high service level, which means that 99% of the time I want product in stock. And if you want higher amounts, we will identify exactly how much inventory. So all of this information is really key when you begin thinking about your omni-channel process, right, as you're going to marketplace. We need to account for it. We need to communicate that back into the supply chain team so that they can position products so that when we launch, we're successful. At the end of the day, when the customers are coming forward, if they're happy, we're happy that we've executed directly to that. And as we've talked quite a bit in here, there are challenges, right? Things happen in the marketplace, and essentially, we need to do our best to prepare for them.
I have a question that came through. It says, why is it important to create a separate channel forecast?
Yeah, great question, Alana. The channel forecast is really important to be able to distinctly identify. So for instance, if we're getting ready to position product in a marketplace and we're doing promotion, it may drastically change the demand in that particular channel and maybe consume all the inventory. So if we don't separate out that specific demand that's going to be driving it, we won't understand where the trends are going. We won't understand potentially the impact that a promotion in that specific channel would have for us. So being able to separate them so that we can incorporate insight, we call these opinions, from a forecasting perspective on where we think demand is going to go when we begin planning our next journey for that customer on this specific channel. Thank you, Alana.
Talk through planning for e-commerce ROI. I love what you were just highlighting, and what I hear a lot from you is, we talk about this all the time on our side. Of course, there's always a blend in these decisions of art and science. That's true for our customers making a decision about if DynamicWeb is the right platform for them, but of course for their customers as well. You know, we're really dealing in a world still that is, of course, data's there and it's real. So how do we pay attention, look at the data that matters the most, and also use our own gifts. You and I talked at the top, the storytelling, the consultancy, really blending those two worlds is part of what makes our team so special. And I really hear that from you as you were just walking us through that demo. So thank you for that overview. And it's a perfect pivot here as we look at just some of the key things, that e-commerce can do from an increasing revenue perspective. So, really what we're talking about, the summary of these is it's really creating, an e-commerce site is really like having an always-on automated sales rep. It's one that's available 24/7 to guide customers through that purchasing journey. And so that's obviously that better, more convenient, expanding online visibility. We talked about this already at the top of the call. You're expanding your sales outreach. You spoke to it really well when those, promotions are coming up, and including like loyalty programs. How do you drive your best customers to continue purchasing more from you? So things like we have feature favorites list and reorder functionality, subscription model, right? And that subscription model can be so powerful, I know on your side from a demand planning perspective, because it then gives you visibility if they're going to be repeat purchases made of a product or products. right? So something we really emphasize for our customers, getting that functionality stood up, really driving customers, to leverage that is a powerful way to really, create a more predictable future revenue growth goal, which is a great, segue into that last one. Again, I ask every time on a first call is, what are you doing today, revenue-wise, and where do you want to be in the future? So how do we, help our customers on that growth? And I'd love to hear, some of your thoughts on how, these increasing revenue components.
Yeah. So, I think great points in here. What we're talking about in a lot of cases is just getting very proactive with respect to how we're moving forward. You talked about this very early on, Jacob, which is, what's our intention? What's our goal and our objective? We're not reacting anymore. We're getting in front of these overall plans and supporting them. We're really talking about executing on a ruthless basis, right? Meaning we are planning for this. So, yes, absolutely. Planning inventory to align with growth, support the goals and objectives of the overall organization is a key element.
Love that. And those are some of the positives. There are also some, abilities to reduce some costs. So again, it's streamlining efficiencies, taking manual processes and making them automated. A key one that comes up for us all the time is price lists. If they're maintained in Excel, then nobody knows the source of truth and nobody knows what the right price is for the right product. So how do you automate that? Obviously it can come out of ERP, but also using our platform as well to push the right price to the right customer at the right time. And overall, it's just efficiencies. And we've talked, multiple times about the inventory alignment, but that's a key component again. The ability to display that on the front end. We can do it, red, not available, green, it is available, or get really granular and actually, specifically, identify the number of SKUs from a warehouse or warehouses. So a lot of capability, flexibility on the front end, but it's all about, again, reducing those manual costs that so often exist with a customer who, is not fully embraced online world. Just got a little, data point there from Forrester, but 90% of B2B companies can decrease their selling costs by up to 90% by guiding their customers, again, into that online self-service environment.
You bet. I really love how you talk about source of truth. What is the source of truth that we're planning to? That last point down in there for inventory alignment, but driving efficiencies. So much of the efficiency is, what are we planning to? If we know what our goal and objective is, we can align directly to that. So, a really key point, which is, what's our source of truth and what are we planning to?
So there's one last question that came through, or if anyone has any other questions, of course, put them in. But it says, how frequently should ABC analysis be conducted?
Yeah, great question, Alana. Thanks for reading. So from what we're talking about with the ABC analysis, we're really talking about, there's another closely called concept called SKU rationalization, which is, how frequently do we go in and reevaluate the overall performance? The expectation, and typically what I recommend, is no more frequently than monthly, and potentially on a quarterly basis. I would tell you the exception to that would be the type of product that you're selling in the life cycle of that product. Longer life cycle items, if we reevaluate them too frequently, it may cause minor changes, right? And changes in our inventory strategy. On the other hand, if we have product that's moving quite quickly, that would necessitate potentially a more rapid or more frequent analysis of how things are performing. One of the things that I didn't necessarily go into, and I can shift back over there and highlight this, is when we talk about reanalyzing that product, basically what we're doing is saying, are all of these SKUs that reside in this box right in here, are they still there? Or did some of them drop off? Did they move to another box and we need to change the behavior? What's their movement doing? On the other hand, we might have had a product that had previously been maybe down here in our Cs, a little bit of sporadic demand that now moved into, maybe we moved up into a B class item, we're starting to see demand on it. If we don't align our demand or our inventory positioning directly with how that product is performing, we're likely going to run into service level issues and not being able to fill. The issue with that is, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when people go out, when they're going out and they're checking the website and they're saying there's no product available. Well, we might actually push it back into these boxes. So as we're talking about the shorter life cycle, I would tell you it's a typically monthly or quarterly. How we analyze it is what we would do, but it's a really important factor. I would tell you the other important factors, we're talking about limited resources in the environment. We have a lot of new products oftentimes that want to get introduced into the mix. If we're consuming the resources with these products that aren't moving, it's really time to move them out, right? So this serves a couple different purposes: allow room for the new products to enter in, keep our website fresh, keep our product assortment fresh. And by the way, let's remove those that are not performing. Let's stop focusing on those. Let's take those resources and invest in new products and those products that are moving. And I think I'll echo Jacob. Sincerely appreciate all of your insight. Every conversation that we've had is always enlightening me with respect to how people perform and what actually an e-commerce platform does. It's not just a selling entity, right? It's really enabling that customer satisfaction. There's really an opportunity to connect in there. So thank you for sharing that and your insights in the marketplace.
Oh, absolutely. And same from your perspective. This is so helpful because every conversation, again, we have with a prospective customer or current customer, the inventory availability, information availability comes up. So I just encourage anybody who's watching this, if you have any questions, a place that you potentially see either DynamicWeb and StockIQ, or potentially even a combination of us supporting you, you've got our information on the screen. Please reach out to Jeffrey and myself, and we would love to continue today's conversation. So thank y'all so much for joining. It's been a pleasure being part of this discussion.
Likewise, real pleasure. Thank you all for attending today.